Thank you, Madam Chair. And I, too, want to acknowledge the witnesses and thank you for having a hearing on such an important topic, which is natural gas development across the U.S. And as we've heard, and as the Chair and the Ranking Member, and I think the committee in its entirety know, our nation's clean burning and job-creating natural gas will play an important role in strengthening energy security both at home and abroad. The ongoing crisis in Ukraine and Russia's recent announcement just this week to cut off natural gas supplies shows why we need to responsibly develop our natural gas reserves and expand our capacity to develop and deliver this domestic resource to the market, both American and the global market. And of course, this would also bring economic benefits at home. And in fact, just today we learned that Colorado's Weld County, which is on the northeastern plains of my state, had the largest percentage increase in employment in the U.S. in 2013, due in part to oil and gas development. This shows how oil and gas has been and will continue to be a critical part of our economy, which is why I support safe and responsible development of these resources. So in that vein, I was pleased with the Department of Energy's recently announced proposal to streamline its natural gas export review process, effectively trimming 2 regulatory steps into one smooth process. I've been proud to lead the bipartisan effort to push this administration to cut red tape and speed up the process. That said, I do think Congress has a role here as well, and that's why I'm going to continue to work on legislation to provide more certainty to the Department of Energy process, and I'm pleased to be working with the Chair in this effort. I also heard the Ranking Member call for more certainty as well. So in that vein, we introduced legislation yesterday that will put a timeline on DOE to make its final decision on public interest for LNG export applications, something that Mr. McNally suggested in his testimony. This bill also creates a path for judicial review if DOE doesn't make a timely decision, and requires public disclosure of where the natural gas is exported so that all Americans will know where our gas is going. I have to tell you, I think this is a solution that works for all stakeholders by ensuring a timely decision for projects while still allowing for the technical analysis needed to make a good decision. I look forward to continuing to work with Energy Secretary Moniz as well as Deputy Principal Assistant Secretary Chris Smith, from whom we will hear today, to take full advantage of responsibly utilizing our vast natural gas resources for both domestic consumption and export to global markets. Thank you again, Madam Chair, for holding this hearing, and of course I'm really eager to hear what our witnesses have to say. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Smith, let me follow up with you on the question of how quickly the DOE has acted or could act. As I think you know, I introduced a piece of legislation yesterday that I mentioned earlier along with the chairwoman, and it would require the DOE to make a decision within 45 days. How long would DOE need to make that decision?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. So DOE obviously will comply with the letter and spirit of the law as written.
So if we tell you to use 45 days, you would be able to comply with a 45-day requirement?
Again, Senator, I'm confident that whatever the law requires, that the department will be able to accomplish.
Thank you. I serve on the Armed Services and the Intelligence Committees, and I have a deep appreciation for the national security implications of natural gas exports. On Monday, Russia announced that it will suspend its natural gas deliveries to Ukraine. We've seen that movie before, and it wasn't the first time Russia's held its natural gas supply over Ukraine's head. A criticism of exports has been that approving U.S. exports today won't have an effect for years to come. Mr. McNally, in your testimony, you mentioned how the prospect of LNG exports are already boosting Japan's bargaining position. Could you explain the connection a little bit more, and what about places obviously beyond Japan?
Yes, Senator Udall. I was in Japan on a business trip back in March, speaking with officials there, and while their negotiations with their LNG suppliers are secret, they said the smiles have never been wider, their backs have never been straighter in negotiating these long-term LNG contracts because of the gas they've contracted to get from the U.S. but will not receive for several years. So it has vastly improved Japan's bargaining position. Last month, Russia cut a deal with Eni, the Italian energy company, and had to severely weaken. Well, we don't know all the details, but from the press reports, it's clear that the Italians got a great deal. They got a lower price, and they weakened that Russian control over the over the gas price. Mr. Putin recently ran to China and signed a deal that's pretty favorable for the Chinese. So I think it's fair to say, sir, that, pardon me, but we've already sort of gotten in the head of the Russians. And what we're getting ready to do has materially impacted how Russia is contracting right as we speak and will affect their revenues, if not the actual volume of their exports.
Senator, excuse me, can I add to that?
Sure, Ms. Rosenberg, yeah.
Right. So I would just add to the argument that when people offer that LNG exports from the United States can do nothing to help Ukraine today, that doesn't mean that we should do nothing to help them, Europe, and others in the future. So we have understood that as the natural gas production in the United States has increased, it has sent cargoes that might have been destined for this market elsewhere, including to Europe, which has given certain consumers the ability to negotiate harder with Gazprom and to achieve lower prices. Lithuania, for example, indicated that in contract renegotiations in May, they were able to get a lower price for their gas from Russia. So as Mr. McNally has said, this is already having an effect now, even without the United States sending LNG abroad, in being able to lower certain prices for certain of our allies abroad in Europe and in Northeast Asia, and more U.S. LNG on the market will only increase their ability to do that.
We certainly have a stake in the Baltic countries. I want to make sure Mr. Weiss and Mr. Durbin also can comment.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like to submit for the record information that actually Europe is paying a higher price from Gazprom now than they did several years ago. In fact, one of the highest prices ever, which is $485 per 1,000 cubic meters of gas. And so all of this new supply has not really seemed to have affected that. Second, the challenge for helping Ukraine is even if we have all the export terminals that everybody wants, there's no guarantee that gas will be sold to either Ukraine or Europe. Of the ones that have been approved by DOE so far, only one, the Sabine project, is going to be selling gas to Europe, to Spain and France and the UK. All the rest of the gas and part of Sabine's is going to Asia. So unless we're going to have a law that forces exports to go to Europe, then as long as the market price for natural LNG is much higher in Asia than it is in Europe, that's where the gas is going to go.
Mr. Durbin.
Fortunately, Senator, the market works, and no matter where the gas is going to go from here, it is going to help moderate prices globally, so it will help Ukraine, even if the gas is going to Asia. I mean, today, just the fact that we are not importing natural gas, as Ms. Rosenberg was saying, has already had an impact, across the globe on LNG prices. And for us to now be able to get into the game and to send these clear signals, both to customers and to other countries, that we are committed to doing this, it is going to have that positive impact for our allies and customers around the world.
These are all important points of view, and I will study them further. I did want to add in on this note, we've imposed sanctions on countries in the past, and most notably on Iran, and markets almost immediately act. To me, natural gas exports would be a form of a positive sanction that has real benefits to our economy. But again, thanks to the panel, and this is a very, very important discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.